The rain poured relentlessly over the streets of Lagos, painting the night in streaks of gray and gold from the glimmering headlights. Emeka gripped the steering wheel tightly as the convoy sliced through Third Mainland Bridge, his eyes flicking between the rearview mirror and the wet road ahead. His boss, Idaora Nwosu, sat at the back of her bulletproof SUV, scrolling through her tablet with an air of arrogance that could silence thunder. To her, Emeka was invisible, a shadow that opened doors, carried handbags, and knew when not to speak. Suddenly, the wail of sirens shattered the rhythmic hum of the rain. From nowhere, two motorbikes swerved in front of them, their riders masked and armed. Emeka's instincts kicked in. He slammed the brakes just as bullets pinged against the armored glass. "Down, ma!" he shouted, twisting the steering wheel hard. Idaora froze, her face pale with shock. The convoy scattered, but their car was boxed in by a truck. The gunman fired again, closer this time. Without thinking, Emeka climbed into the back seat and pulled Idaora down, forcing her to sit on his lap. Her perfume filled his nose as he wrapped his arms around her, pressing her close to the floor. "Don't move," he whispered, his voice trembling but firm. The gunfire continued, echoing through the night like angry drums. Minutes felt like hours until police sirens wailed from the distance, sending the attackers fleeing into the storm. When silence finally returned, Idaora lifted her head, eyes wide with disbelief, not at the attack, but at the man who had dared to hold her like that. Outside, the chaos was over. Inside, something new had begun, something neither of them could yet name. By morning, the news had spread like wildfire. Lagos blogs, gossip pages, and Twitter threads buzzed with one story: billionaire Idaora Nwosu seen sitting on her driver's lap during gun attack. A single blurry photo, captured by a bystander before the police arrived, was enough to spark a nationwide frenzy. Headlines mocked, memes flooded social media, and every gossip show had something to say. Maybe the driver was more than a driver, one talk show host laughed. Within hours, Emeka's face, once unknown, was plastered everywhere. In Idaora's Ikoyi mansion, the atmosphere was icy. She sat at her glass dining table, watching the footage with clenched fists. Her board members had called in panic, her family whispered behind her back, and the press waited outside her gate like hungry wolves. Emeka stood before her, cap in hand, shame washing over him. "Madam, I swear, I was only trying to save your life," he said softly. Idaora looked up sharply, her pride cutting through her fear. "You think saving me gives you permission to humiliate me in front of the whole country?" she snapped. Emeka's throat tightened, but he didn't argue. He knew he couldn't win against a woman like Idaora, powerful, proud, and used to control. Still, her anger didn't hide the truth in her eyes. Gratitude and confusion mixed beneath the rage. She finally sighed and turned away. "Take the day off," she said curtly. "I need time to fix this mess." As Emeka walked out, reporters shouted his name at the gate, cameras flashing. He lowered his head and kept moving. Somewhere deep down, he wondered if that moment in the SUV, that brief, desperate act, had changed not just his fate, but hers too. 2 days later, Emeka received the call he dreaded. The company's human resources department informed him he was being placed on suspension pending internal review. The words burned in his ears. He sat on the edge of his small bed in Mushin, staring at the cracked wall of his one-room apartment. His neighbors whispered outside, already aware of the gossip. Even the local newspaper vendor had a headline that made his stomach twist: "Driver turned hero or opportunist?" Emeka sighed deeply, his calloused hands gripping his phone. All he had ever wanted was to keep his job and support his mother back home in Enugu. He had worked for Idaora for 3 years, never late, never careless, and now a single moment had turned him into a public spectacle. His phone buzzed with missed calls and text messages from strangers pretending to be journalists, some offering money for interviews. He ignored them all. Meanwhile, in her penthouse office overlooking Victoria Island, Idaora faced her own storm. Investors were threatening to pull out, and her company's shares had dropped overnight. She stared at the boardroom screen as her PR manager explained the damage. "Ma, people think you're having an affair with your driver," he said nervously. Adora's jaw tightened. "Then make them think otherwise. I want a statement out today." But when her secretary hesitated and mentioned that Emeka's suspension was trending with the hashtag justice for the driver, something in Adora's chest shifted. Against her better judgment, she felt guilt creeping in. He had risked his life for her, and she had repaid him with disgrace. Still, she swallowed the feeling, straightened her blazer and said coldly, "He'll survive." Yet that night, lying awake in her silent mansion, the image of Emeka's trembling hands around her as bullets flew refused to leave her mind. Emeka was sweeping the front of his small compound when a black Range Rover stopped abruptly in front of the gate. He looked up, startled. 2 bodyguards stepped out first, followed by the last person he expected to see, Adora Nwosu. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and black trousers, her presence made the entire street pause. Children gawked, neighbors whispered, and even the air seemed to hold its breath. "Madam," Emeka stammered, wiping his hands nervously on his trousers. He couldn't believe she had come all the way to Mushin, a place she had probably only ever seen through tinted windows. Adora looked around, her face unreadable. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. Emeka nodded and led her inside his modest home. The room smelled faintly of soap and kerosene. A faded photo of his mother hung on the wall. Adora glanced at it before sitting on the only chair he owned. "I came to apologize," she began, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "I handled things badly. You didn't deserve the humiliation." Emeka's heart thumped. He had imagined this moment many times, but not like this, not with her looking uncertain, almost human. "It's fine, Ma," he said gently. "You did what anyone in your position would do." Adora shook her head. "No. You saved my life. I let them punish you for it." She reached into her bag and placed an envelope on the table. "Your suspension is lifted. You're reinstated immediately." For a moment, silence filled the room. A silence heavy with unspoken gratitude and something neither could define. As she stood to leave, Adora glanced at him again, her gaze lingering longer than necessary. "Thank you, Emeka," she said softly before walking out. And as the car drove away, Emeka stood in his doorway, watching the dust rise, realizing that for the first time, Adora Nwosu had called him by his name. When Emeka returned to work the next morning, the entire building buzzed with curiosity. Every pair of eyes followed him from the gate to the garage, from the garage to the main lobby. Security guards whispered behind walkie-talkies, cleaners exchanged knowing glances, and even the receptionist paused mid-greeting when he passed. To them, Emeka was no longer just the quiet driver, he was the man who had made the billionaire Adora Nwosu sit on his lap. He tried to ignore the stares and whispers, focusing on polishing the company vehicles. But when Adora's private elevator opened, the air shifted. She walked out, elegant as always, but her eyes met Emeka's briefly before she turned away. For a second he thought he saw a flicker of warmth, or was it guilt? Either way, it was gone as quickly as it came. Later that day, Adora called for him. "Drive me to the construction site in Lekki," she said coolly as she entered the SUV. The ride was quiet at first. Lagos traffic hummed outside as tension filled the space between them. Emeka gripped the wheel, unsure if he should speak. Finally, she broke the silence. "They're still talking about us, you know." "I know, Ma," he said softly. "It'll pass." Adora sighed, turning her gaze to the window. "You think I care what people say? I've built everything I have from nothing. But this," she paused, her voice faltering for the first time, "this scandal feels different. Personal." Emeka glanced at her reflection in the mirror. "Because it was real, Ma. You could have died." Their eyes met briefly, a quiet understanding passing between them. Then she looked away, pretending to check her phone. But Emeka knew, something between them had shifted again, something deeper than scandal and pride. The sun was setting when Adaora and Emeka returned from the Lekki site. The city's skyline glowed orange, but her thoughts were far darker. As soon as she entered her office, her head of security, Mr. Chuka, was waiting with a folder. "Madam, we found something disturbing," he said in a low tone. Adaora frowned and motioned for him to continue. He opened the folder and spread several photos across her desk, surveillance stills of the attack night. But one image made her blood run cold, a familiar logo on the back of the gunman's truck. It was the same logo as one of her company's subsidiaries. "Are you saying someone inside financed the attack?" she asked sharply. Chuka nodded grimly. "It looks that way. Someone wanted you dead, someone close." Adaora sank into her chair, her fingers trembling slightly. Betrayal wasn't new to her. In the business world, it was a language she had mastered. But this was different. This was personal. She dismissed Chuka with orders to keep investigating quietly. As the door shut behind him, she found herself staring out at the Lagos skyline, feeling suddenly vulnerable. Downstairs, Emeka waited by the car, unaware of the storm brewing above. He noticed how long she was taking and debated whether to check on her. When she finally appeared, her face was pale, her usual confidence replaced by quiet unease. "Are you all right, Ma?" he asked softly. Adaora hesitated, then nodded. "Just tired." But as they drove through the glittering city lights, she caught herself glancing at him, the man who had saved her once before. For the first time, she wondered if she might need him again. Not just as her driver, but as the one person she could still trust. 3 nights later, Lagos slept uneasily under a stormy sky. Adaora had just left a late business dinner on Victoria Island, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Emeka opened the door for her, his movements calm as ever, though his eyes scanned every shadow. Ever since the first attack, he'd grown more alert. Every passing motorbike or tinted car put him on edge. They were halfway across the bridge when it happened. Out of nowhere, a black sedan sped up behind them, headlights flashing furiously. Before Emeka could react, a gunshot shattered the silence. The bullet ricocheted off the bulletproof glass, and Adaora screamed. "Down!" Emeka shouted, veering sharply into the next lane as the attackers accelerated beside them. Tires screeched. Horns blared. Lagos traffic turned into chaos. Emeka's heart pounded. He pressed harder on the accelerator, weaving through cars like a man possessed. "Hold on, Ma," he yelled, his voice raw with urgency. Adaora clung to the seat, trembling. Another shot rang out, striking the rear window. Without hesitation, Emeka spun the car into an unfinished road and killed the headlights. They sat in silence, breathing hard as the sound of engines faded into the distance. Adaora's hands shook uncontrollably. Why me again?" she whispered. Emeka turned to her, his eyes fierce yet gentle. "Because someone's still after what you have, or what you know." He looked at her for a moment longer before adding, "But they'll have to go through me first." In that dark, rain-soaked car, Adaora realized something that unsettled her more than the bullets. She trusted him completely. The man she once saw as beneath her had become her only shield in a world she no longer understood. The next morning, Adaora called an emergency meeting at her mansion, but this time only 2 people were invited, Emeka and Mr. Chuka. Her living room, usually bright and welcoming, felt heavy with tension. Files, photos, and a digital tablet lay spread across the glass table. Emeka stood quietly behind her while Chuka explained his findings in a low, serious voice. "Madam," he said, tapping on a picture, "the attack was financed by someone inside your board, Mr. Uche Okafor." Adaora's eyes hardened. Uche had been her father's business partner before she took over the company. A man she trusted, who had smiled at her, toasted her success, and promised loyalty. "He's been embezzling funds," Chuka continued. "And when you ordered an audit, he must have panicked. The attack was his way to stop you before the truth surfaced." Adaora leaned back slowly, the betrayal sinking in like a blade. "And the second attack?" she asked quietly. Chuka hesitated. Same vehicle. Same source. Emeka stepped forward. Ma, you need to go to the police, he said firmly. You're not safe while he's free. But Adaora shook her head. Not yet. If I move too soon, he'll destroy the evidence. I need to catch him in his own trap. Her tone carried the confidence of a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes before, but her eyes betrayed something else: fear. When Chuka left, Adaora poured herself a glass of water, her hands trembling slightly. Emeka watched her in silence, the weight of everything pressing between them. You shouldn't face this alone, he said softly. She looked up, meeting his gaze. I'm not alone, she replied. For the first time, the words carried warmth and trust that went beyond duty. The next evening, Adaora arrived at the company headquarters under heavy security. A board meeting had been scheduled, and she insisted on attending in person despite Chuka's warnings. Her expression was calm, but inside her chest, her heart raced like a trapped bird. Emeka stood a few feet behind her, dressed in a clean black suit, not as her driver this time, but as her silent protector. When Adaora entered the boardroom, the men rose in respect. Among them sat Uche Okafor, his false smile wide and confident. Madam, we're glad to see you safe, he said smoothly. Adaora returned his smile with one of her own, though hers carried the edge of quiet danger. Safe? That depends on how honest everyone in this room is, she said, her tone crisp. As the meeting went on, she presented slides about financial discrepancies and missing funds. Uche shifted in his chair, sweat glistening on his forehead. When she clicked to the final slide, a hidden camera feed appeared on the screen, showing one of Uche's men paying the gunman weeks earlier. Gasps filled the room. You tried to kill me, Uche, Adaora said coldly. You used my own company's money to do it. Uche stood abruptly, stammering, You can't prove that. But before he could finish, uniformed officers entered the room, led by Chuka. Actually, we can, Chuka said, holding up signed bank records. The arrest was swift. As the officers dragged Uche away, he glared at Adaora. You'll regret this, he spat. But Adaora didn't flinch. For the first time in weeks, she felt free. Outside, she stepped into the evening air and turned to Emeka, who had stood by silently through it all. It's over, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Not yet, ma. You still have to heal. And for once, Adaora didn't argue. Weeks passed, and peace slowly returned to Adaora's world. The headlines shifted from scandal to triumph. Billionaire CEO exposes corruption in her company. Investors who once doubted her now praised her courage. But beyond the flash of cameras and congratulatory calls, something deeper had changed inside her. She no longer felt untouchable or alone. Emeka remained by her side through it all. Though his role as driver had resumed, their relationship carried a quiet warmth that neither could ignore. One evening, as the sun melted into the Lagos lagoon, Adaora asked him to drive her to the beach, not for business, but for peace. They sat by the shore, the waves whispering against the sand, the air soft with the scent of salt and memory. I used to think power meant never needing anyone, she said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. But that night in the car, you showed me something different. Emeka looked at her, unsure if he should speak. All I did was what anyone should do, ma. She smiled faintly, turning to face him. No. You did what only a man with courage and heart would do. A pause lingered between them, long enough for her to whisper, and maybe I needed more than saving that night. For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of the sea and the rhythm of their breathing. Then Adaora reached out, placing her hand gently over his. Thank you, Emeka, for my life and my peace. He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't owe me anything, ma. She smiled softly. Maybe not. But sometimes, life owes us both a new beginning. As the tide rolled in under the fading light, they sat side by side, no longer boss and driver, but two souls bound by fire, danger, and an unexpected kind of love that had survived the storm. Please, kindly hit the subscribe button, like this video and share. This means a lot to us. Thank you for watching.